Hello everyone, thank you for coming. I know it's in the middle of the day, so a lot of the people I know were waiting for the recording to see it then. But thank you for coming out and being here. So I'm just gonna read what I wrote for the little advertising on the website, because I like what I wrote.
Closer.
Like this?
Yeah.
Okay. What if it were possible to become well and stay well in the face of the inevitable stressors of life? At this lecture, you will learn simple and practical tips to enhance your level of wellness and ability to maintain it long term. A bipolar diagnosis does not have to be a life sentence of suffering and anguish. Instead, it can become a strength that fosters personal growth and enhances one's life. The tips outlined in this talk can provide a solid foundation for a lasting recovery. So I think for me, that was key as far as learning how to stay well. Because I could become well for a certain amount of time, but then I would lose that wellness. And I tell more of my personal story on the webinar that I did for International Bipolar Foundation a few years ago. So that is accessible on the ibpf.org website. So if you're interested to hear more of my story, I'm going to refer to it today because a lot of what I went through informs the work I do now. But that webinar goes more into detail about the things I've gone through in the last 26 years since I was diagnosed with bipolar and Crohn's disease at the same time. And a little later, I'm going to talk about that connection between the gut and the brain, because there is a very strong connection there. So these are the 10 topics that I put together for this talk, and they're kind of arbitrary. I like the number 10, so I just made them 10. Some of them can go together, and they all really interrelate and interact, overlap. So my number 1 is hope, belief. And I always start with hope because I feel like that's the most important thing for any undertaking that we are about to undertake. We need hope, and we need a belief that it's possible. Otherwise, why would we do it, right? Number 2, back to nature. 3, sleep. 4, diet. 5, exercise. 6, spirituality, meaning and purpose in life. 7, inner awareness, developing that inner awareness. 8, interpersonal and social rhythm therapy. 9, support system. And 10, customized wellness plan. So I'm going to try to cover each topic about 4 minutes. So I'm going to go pretty quickly through all of them. And that's why this talk is more of a jumping off point. Like all of my topics are just there for you to do more research on if that's an area that you want to start on. Or if you're a caregiver or a loved one of someone with bipolar, that's an area that you could work with them on. So they're kind of ideas that you can use and go from there. And then I'm going to try to finish in 45 minutes so we can have time for questions and answers at the end. So I really believe in a holistic approach to healing mind, body, spirit, and that's what I work with my clients. I work at a clinic that's medication management primarily, and so I bring the non-medication approaches to that, to people's recovery and treatment plans. As I feel that you may notice that medication management is not on that list, and that's because there's already a strong emphasis on that in our mental health care system. And I know when I was first diagnosed, that was really all I was provided with, was these are the medications you need to be on, and I didn't know any of these other things. So these I had to learn on my own. And now with the peer support movement, people with lived experience being the pioneers and leading the way and helping others navigate their own recovery paths, a lot more of these areas have come out. That's only been, when I was diagnosed, it wasn't really very much there yet. It's kind of the last 10, 15 years that the peer movement has really gotten stronger. What else I need to say about that? So just as far as for caregivers and loved ones, just know that you can't do the inner work for the person with bipolar or the outer work for that matter. But you can definitely support them. You can surround them with love. You can believe in them. You can encourage them. And you can hold high expectations for them and for their future. Because sometimes when we're going through episodes, especially depression for me, I did not have that expectation for anything good coming in the future. And there's just a lot of hopelessness. so it's very common in depression and in constantly going through ups and downs and those severe mood changes. So in holding for others that sense of things are going to get better and you can have an amazing life, that can help them. You're holding that for them until they can start believing that. So that moves me into hope, belief, and motivation. So like I said, without hope, it's very hard to move forward or think that anything you're going to do is worth the effort if you don't think there's hope. So that's the thing I needed the most at the beginning. And it took me a while to develop that because I didn't have someone like me saying you can get better and you can stay well and you can have an amazing life and reach your goals and dreams. I had doctors telling me you need to take these medications, you need to do therapy, and hopefully you'll be able to manage your illness. So I think we can gain hope from other people's experiences, and that's one of the reasons I speak and share and work with people, because they've told me that my story gives them hope. And it's my hope that you gain hope from this talk too. So I feel that it took me to get to a point where I felt I'm going to do whatever it takes to get well. And once I got to that level of motivation, then things just came to me. And I think our beliefs are very powerful. When we make a decision, like they say, where there's a will, there's a way. Once I had that strong will, then the knowledge, the information, the people, everything I needed started just coming into place. So that's where motivation comes from. And I talk a lot with my clients about personal responsibility, because when I was first diagnosed, I just listened to what the doctor said, and I was kind of a passive patient, and I wanted to be a good patient. So I did what they told me, even though I didn't always want to or agree with it. Or for me, the medications had a lot of side effects. I was very sensitive to all the side effects, and I know that's a big concern for a lot of people. And the reason why they stopped taking their medication, and I never recommend that, of course. It's usually not safe to just stop any medication. You need to work with your doctor and figure that part out. So the personal responsibility happened later as I learned I'm the one that's actually living in my body, and I'm the one that's using my brain, and these other people who are trying to help me, they don't actually have to live in my body. All of them, I would say, had very good intentions to help me. But I had to take personal responsibility and educate myself and learn all that I could and do what felt was in alignment with me. So once I learned how to do that, then it was a very powerful, empowering shift in my thinking. And I think that also relates to how we frame our experiences. So reframing, instead of feeling like a victim, because I felt like a victim of my brain and of my gut with Crohn's disease. It affects the intestine, and I felt like my own body was attacking me and I had no control over it. I was a victim of my own body. So as I was able to educate myself, learn more things that helped me start feeling more empowered about my health, and not just that I had to blindly follow what other people told me, then I was able to reframe my experiences and say, actually, I'm grateful for going through all of that, because I learned so much, and it made me a strong person, and it made me compassionate, and allowed me to do the work that I do, and to give a voice to, this topic of wellness and recovery for mental health. So I never want to, like I said, the providers I've worked with in the past and the ones that I work with now as a provider myself, typically are very highly educated. They want the best for their patients. And when I work with someone, when I go to my doctor, I know that there are two experts in the room, that I'm the expert on me and they're the expert on their area. And so we work together as a team. And before, I didn't feel like I was an expert. I felt like they were the only expert, right? So I tell that to my clients too, as far as, know the importance of, yourself better than anyone else. And always remember that, and always follow what feels right to you. And if something doesn't feel right, talk about it, bring it up to your provider. have a discussion. Know that your opinion and how you feel is more important than anyone else, because everyone on your treatment team is there to help you get better. So back to nature. I think nature has a lot to teach us, and it definitely has helped me learn how to balance myself. That was one of the tricks, I guess, in keeping myself well, was learning how to come back to balance. Because, in the past, my episodes were very severe. I had really long manias and very deep and long depressions, completely paralyzing. For years, I couldn't function at all in those depressions. And my manias could go 6 months, a year. I'd always be hospitalized for them because they were so severe. So I had to learn how to not get to that point of no return where I couldn't bring myself back to balance on my own. And I think nature can teach us that. So just spending time in nature, like this morning I went to the backyard and sat there barefoot with my feet on the ground and felt the sun, closed my eyes and opened my eyes and watched the bees and for me it's just a very connected experience to do that, and it helps me get grounded. In fact, what I put on there, grounding, you can find that, The Science of Grounding by Clint Hilber on YouTube. And it's a very fascinating documentary where he talks about all of the scientific research related to grounding. And basically it's just taking off your shoes and walking on the ground, whether it's grass, the sand, the earth, anything that's connected to the earth, because nowadays we're so separated from nature. We're always wearing shoes. And actually, just the way when you ground something electrically, it connects to the earth and the earth absorbs it. So the earth actually, we have a symbiotic relationship where we share energy, and we're blocking that often. We're walking on floors instead of the earth. We're having artificial sunlight all the time. We survived and evolved as a species over thousands of years by living in harmony with nature. And we didn't have electricity, we didn't have artificial light, we didn't have processed foods, we didn't have cell phones and computers, modern conveniences. And so those things, while they're amazing and they've improved our lives tremendously, they also separate us from our connection with the earth and with nature. And so I think getting back to that the more that we can, especially for people with sensitive brains, it can really help to support that regulation of our, the things we need to be in balance. And I'm going to talk about some of those things on the next slides. And one thing so I put light therapy box on there. So those are useful for people who have seasonal affective disorder, for example, or people who have bipolar often are affected by less light during the fall and winter time, and they can tend to get more depressed during that time. So a light therapy box can be very helpful. And it's a special kind of light. There's certain companies that make them, and you just be in front of it for maybe 10 minutes a day. But be careful, because for me, when I was using it, it did trigger mania. So you just want to be careful with that. If you feel like, those manic energies are coming, I would not use the light box during that time. Okay. So sleep is one of those things that's connected to nature. And when we learn how to better regulate our sleep, I think it can take us a very long way in learning how to keep ourselves well. And there was a really fascinating webinar that I watched a few years ago by Colleen McClung, and it was called It's That Time of the Day Again, Biological Clocks, Behavior, and Psychiatric Disorders. And it's available on the ibpf.org website. You can just search for her name or that title. And she talks about the research they did, and they actually created bipolar mice by altering their biological clock genes. And the mice were exhibiting, mania and depression in mice world. And so that just shows the strong connection between, our sleep and our sleep-wake cycle and our biological clock and our mood. And so for people with bipolar disorder, it's possible that for some of us at least, our biological clock genes could be different. So we want to help regulate that as much as we can by things that we can do. So good sleep hygiene. And this is something I learned over a long time because I started having sleep issues when I first had bipolar symptoms. And so it's most of my adult life. From the age of 20, I turned 47 today, so 27 years of dealing with sleep issues. So one of the things, and I've worked with sleep doctors, I've learned a lot through school and through my work with clients. Creating that consistent bedtime and wake time can be really helpful and really useful in improving our sleep. It helps our brain learn that rhythm, just like getting back to nature. It used to be that when it was dark, our brain was triggered to go into sleep mode, and when the sun came up, we would be awake. And now that we are in lights all the time, it confuses our brain, right? And for some people, it makes it more difficult to have that regular rhythm. So you want to minimize and eliminate blue light before bed and any kind of bright light. So and for me, I try to have like an hour of winding down time to do that, to be in lower light. In my bathroom, I'll put like a very dim light if I need to use the bathroom later. And those are some apps. Like I use Twilight on my phone and computer, which actually changes the blue light on your electronic devices so that it doesn't have that same effect on keeping us awake. Because a lot of studies have shown that blue light does that. And how many of us use our phones and computers right before bed? Right? I just feel it. I know when I do that, I can feel myself being woken up and getting out of sleep mode. So something to be aware of. And I have another slide on sleep, good sleep hygiene. So if you can go outside first thing in the morning and get sun through your eyes, meaning not wearing glasses, not wearing contacts even, because that blocks the UV, that can trigger melatonin production, the hormone that helps regulate our sleep-wake cycle. So that can be really helpful for improving our sleep. And something that my sleep doctor worked on with me when I was trying to get off sleeping pills was sleep compression. And so I had a tendency, because I was so tired, I'd be in bed for 9 or 10 hours, but I'd only sleep like 5 of those hours. And he said, no, you need to be out of bed. Only give yourself like 6 hours in bed, and your brain's gonna start being trained to make the most of those 6 hours. So that's an example of sleep compression. And it's part of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is something you can look into if you or your loved one deals with sleep issues. And in my work with people diagnosed with bipolar, I would say 95% of them have sleep issues. So it's very linked. Any mood disorders, depression, anything is often linked with sleep issues. Another thing is eating, like trying to finish your dinner 2 to 3 hours before bedtime and not have a heavy meal, trying to digest when you're going to sleep. Sometimes I use herbal teas that are relaxing. They have a lot in health food stores now, not just chamomile, but all kinds of different sleep teas. And regular exercise can be very good for improving sleep, but usually not right before bed or later in the day, unless you're doing yoga or Tai Chi or some of the more relaxing exercises. Because if you're doing a lot of aerobic stuff, that can actually wake you up and take you out of sleep mode. And there's a lot online. I share with my clients things that I find online that can help people with improving their sleep. So that's a big one. I would say for me, once I learned how to get my sleep a lot more on track, and I started following a lot of these good sleep hygiene tips, tools, it really improved things for me all across the board. And I was finally able to get off sleeping pills that I had been on for most of my adult life. And so that was huge. It actually took me like 2 years to go off them. I had to do it that gradually. But once I was off, I was sleeping so much better. So I focus on that area a lot with my clients. Diet and intestinal health. So I mentioned that I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease at the same time as bipolar disorder. And now we have a whole field called neurogastroenterology. So it's being acknowledged that the brain and the gut are very closely connected. And in fact, we manufacture 90% of our serotonin in the gut. And that's a brain chemical that, our brains need to function and be happy. A lot of our medications, like the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, relates to that. So the issue with inflammation, there's now a lot of research showing there's a strong connection between our level of inflammation in the body and mental health issues. And especially I've seen a lot related to depression. So when I changed my diet almost 5 years ago, I found a book called Self-Healing Colitis and Crohn's. So I did it to heal my Crohn's symptoms. And it ended up healing my mental health way more than I expected. I thought I was doing fine with the bipolar at that time. I thought I was stable, I wasn't being hospitalized, I wasn't having severe episodes, but I didn't realize how much better I could feel mentally and physically until I changed my diet. So my diet now is very low inflammation, and with Crohn's disease, it's a very inflammatory condition. So it can affect the level of inflammation throughout your body. And there's a lot of other conditions that can cause inflammation. So the more that we can learn about how to reduce inflammation and doing that through diet, I think that can really have an effect on improving mental health also. And then there's a book that I was recently introduced to called The Plant Paradox. So even people who eat a plant-based diet, it's information, certain plants have lectins in them, and those are the things that protect the plants from invaders, animals, things that want to eat them. And so they actually affect our health too. So there's certain foods you might want to look into and avoid if you're having issues with them, and that can also help lower inflammation in the body. So keeping a food log, for me, it definitely helped me learn about my own body and what was okay for me to eat and what my body didn't do well with. And when I started following the diet that I currently follow to heal the Crohn's disease, I did that at the beginning, and I also, as my intestine healed, I was able to handle more foods. So sometimes people do that too, where they cut out a lot of foods or foods that tend to be allergy, cause people can tend to have sensitivities to them or allergies. You cut them all out, and then you can add them in one at a time and see what you're okay with and what you're not. Because everyone's different and we all have different sensitivities, and it's finding the foods that work for you and the ones that don't. Okay. And, a lot of people talk about probiotics, and I use those. So that's another area to look into if you feel like that might be helpful for you. They're just good bacteria, and they help keep the bad bacteria at bay. And so improving our gut microbiome is a big topic now, and I think it's a really important one. And I always recommend working with a practitioner, someone who's a nutritionist or someone who's very knowledgeable, MD, naturopath, about diet and getting tested to see if you have deficiencies and then work from there. So people always ask, so what should I eat? There's so much conflicting information out there, and I kind of heard some of it, but I think it's safe to say to eat whole foods and real foods, and try to limit processed foods and fried foods and sugar, refined sugar. I eat a lot of fruit, so that's fruit sugar, but it has a different effect in my body than refined sugar, for sure. And those are some pictures of foods that I made and eaten. Sometimes I like taking pictures because I think it's pretty. The more colors you can have in your food, the more different nutrients you're getting, antioxidants and minerals and vitamins, all of that. So, yeah. And one thing I do every morning is I have lemon water. And that is, even though lemon seems like it's acidic, it's actually alkalinizing in the body, has that effect to bring ourselves, to be less acidic. And I think the typical diet in the US is very acidic and inflammatory. So the more things we can do to, help bring ourselves back to alkaline, or in that direction, it tends to be more healing. Like I said, brightly colored vegetables. And, there's a lot of focus on organic now. I do try to buy organic foods as much as I can, but I know that's expensive for a lot of people. And if you have a choice between buying organic produce and buying organic animal products, if animal products are in your diet, I would put the money toward the animal products, because actually what they found is there's 40 to 80% higher level of pesticides in conventional animal products compared to conventional produce, because the animals, it's accumulating in their tissues and in the milk, and so it's much more highly concentrated than what's in the produce. Just something to be aware of. And people tell me, well, I can't afford healthy foods. I mean, I work with a lot of people who are very low income, or they don't have a lot of resources, and I understand that. But like I said before, where there's a will, there's a way. And if you have a strong enough desire for something, I think you can find a way. So an idea is just maybe start a community garden or your own little garden and get fresh produce that way, organic produce, or get to know some of your local farmers and see if you can do a trade, or if they're willing to give you excess supplies that they have. And even stores, sometimes stores are about to, like I always talk to my local store about bananas. If your bananas are too big, I eat a lot of bananas, so you can let me know if you're going to throw them out, because I'll take them. So things like that. And I have these books with me over on the table. So this is a book I mentioned, Self-Healing Colitis and Crohn's. And this is a book called Healing Bipolar and Depression by Susie Hoseas, and this is by Dr. David Klein. So Dr. Klein introduced me to Susie, and they both recommend a very similar diet. So when I was first starting out on this, what I eat is a vegan diet, mostly just fruits and vegetables. And it's what's easiest on my intestine, what allowed it to heal. So sometimes I recommend those books if someone's looking for, especially with anyone with a severe GI issue. And I know a lot of my clients with bipolar often have GI issues too. Not always Crohn's disease, but something. And so when they improve their gut health, their brain health, their mental health tends to improve quite a bit. So we're about halfway through. Anyone have any questions now? Just to take a little break. I know I'm going to leave time at the end, but something that's, no, we're good to keep going? Okay. So everyone talks about diet and exercise as things to improve your health. And of course I have to include it here because it's been important for me, and I think everyone, they already know exercise is a natural antidepressant, and it's more effective than medication for mild to moderate depression. And it's very effective for all forms of depression, and just any kind of mental health, physical health. But of course you have to do what is within your ability, and if you have a health condition, you need to work with your doctor to make sure the exercise you're doing works for you. But I like this quote: if exercise was a pill, it would be the most sought after and effective medicine in the world with no side effects. So that was a quote from that book, The Exercise Cure, by Jordan Metzl, MD. So I think if you can find an exercise that you really enjoy, or someone to work out with, you'll have a much higher chance of sticking with your plan and reaching your exercise goals. And I would just also say, like I said with the light therapy box, to be careful with mania and high intensity exercise. I know for me, when I was sometimes in a manic state, I would just want to run all the time to increase the feelings, the euphoric feelings of mania, right? And that just increased it more, the mania. So it was about knowing what brought me up and what brought me down. So if I was more high, I would focus on the grounding and calming exercises like Tai Chi or like yoga, walking or swimming. And I really like yoga, and I try to do that every morning because it really helps me become aware of my body. I can tend to be in my head a lot, and especially just finishing grad school last year, 3 years of always being in my head. I needed to be more aware of my body and what was going on in my body, and it always teaches me things when I listen to it. So just doing 10 or 15 minutes of yoga in the morning has been a really helpful routine for me, and it really helps me center myself and ground myself. So anything like that, stretching. In fact, when I lead my mindfulness group, I often lead them through chair yoga routines. So we do it sitting in our chairs, and I really like that. So, spirituality, or having meaning and purpose in life. And this has been something that's been really important on my recovery journey, is whatever spirituality is to you, and it's different for everyone. For some people, they really connect in their religion, and being part of their religious community and practices is what, takes them to that higher place. For others, it's being in nature, being alone and meditating. So, finding what that is for you, and then doing it on a regular basis. For me, that really helped me have faith when I didn't have very much of that. It helped me trust in something larger than myself. And it helped me find meaning in what I was going through, because some of the suffering I went through, I would not have wished that on my worst enemy. So in finding a purpose in that and coming out the other side of it, it really helped me gain strength, and now I can give that to others. So I like to think about what are the unique gifts that we're here to bring to the world that no one else can. Because I believe that each of us has unique gifts to bring, and there is no one else just like you. So it's important that you're here. The world needs you. So for me, I just can feel it when I'm connected, and different things will bring me that connection at different times. So it's finding those things, experiment, listen to that still small voice within you and let that be right. Versus, following what celebrities are doing, where other people say, well, this is how you be spiritual, or I have to follow this spiritual master. You're actually your own spiritual master, and it's just a matter of accessing that within you. I think teachers can point us in the right direction often, but it has to resonate within you. So this know thyself, it also relates to what I was just talking about. And this is something that I needed to do. I needed to develop this in order to stay well. In the past, when I was younger and I would feel the mania coming on, it felt really good. And I felt like unstoppable, and I felt on top of the world, and nothing could touch me. And so why wouldn't I want to increase those feelings? Why wouldn't I want to do the things that would, make it even stronger? Well, I learned the reasons why I wouldn't want to do those things, because the consequences were pretty destructive and disastrous in my life. So what I learned how to do was, when I first started feeling those feelings, because I acknowledge that's how I am, that my brain likes to do those things, and I think it can be a gift, and we can channel those energies in very positive ways. And when you think about all the amazing people who've achieved incredible things and contributed things to society, a lot of them have like a mental health diagnosis or a bipolar diagnosis. I have a list that I give out to my clients sometimes, famous and successful people with bipolar. And it's full of artists and scientists and actors and musicians and writers. So a lot of times our brains, we can access things that not everyone can. And it's learning how to channel that in a positive direction and manage it and be the master of it. And that's what took me time to learn how to do. And part of what helped me to do that was that inner awareness, developing my own sense of what's going on internally, and if I'm starting to feel those manic energies stirring, I know what I need to do to bring myself back down quickly. And I also know that I can access some of those things, because people ask me often, well, what about my creativity? Like, will that, can you still be creative? Because in my manias, I'm very creative and I don't want to give that up. But I think once we learn how to regulate ourselves, we can access that, but in a safe way and not where it gets out of control, so we lose our ability to really, at least for me, at some point I lost my ability to be creative in any way that anyone could appreciate it, because I was too far, beyond what I could that I could contribute to this realm of reality, right? So things like journaling can really help. If you go online and search for the words mood chart or mood tracker, there's hundreds of them on there, and there's apps where you can keep track every day of, this is how my mood is, and that helps us get that inner awareness because there can be patterns. I know for me, like in the springtime, this time of year in summer, I'd be having more manic episodes, and in the darker times of the year, more depressions. And then for women, to pay attention to our cycles and our hormonal changes, that can also be a precipitator for mood change. And if you're aware of that and you're prepared to do what you need to do to keep yourself in balance, then that's a really important thing of knowing yourself. And then of course, postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis are real disorders that we study in school, and they're not uncommon when a woman gives birth to have her mental health be very affected. As a peer support specialist, so that's someone who has lived experience, who is trained and able to help others on their recovery paths. I really emphasize the importance of language because I feel that language is very powerful and it changes how we think about ourselves and other people. And it affects our identity because how we think about ourselves relates to our identity. So person first language just means I'm a person first. I'm not bipolar, I'm a person. I'm a person who was diagnosed with bipolar, and now it doesn't really affect me in a negative way. So even saying I have bipolar doesn't always feel like it resonates with me, but I use my experience to help others. And so now when I hear someone call someone by their diagnosis, I cringe because it hurts my heart, because that's not who they are. I know some people gain a sense of strength from their diagnosis, and so I don't think that's wrong at all. Like Bipolar Strong and World Bipolar Day. But I think if you're looking at someone saying that's a schizophrenic, that's a bipolar, that you're not acknowledging all the other aspects of who they are. And there were times in my life when that was the only focus of my life, But now that I'm in a different place, it's a very small part. Although my work is a very large part. Anyway, so narrative therapy and reframing. So what story are we telling to ourselves about our life? And that's really what narrative therapy is about, is changing that story, how you relate to your own experiences, to who you are. And reframing, like my mom always taught me, look for the strawberry. And that means look for the good in whatever situation you're in. No matter how dire or tragic it seems to be, there's always something good, and our job is to find it, to find the strawberry. So that's one way we can reframe things, is by knowing that there's a reason for what we're going through and that something good is coming out of it. We're doing on time here. I know we started after 12. Interpersonal and social rhythm therapy. So this is actually a psychotherapy that was developed for bipolar disorder. And its approach to treatment uses methods from interpersonal psychotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, to help people maintain their routines. So just like I was talking about before, knowing how to regulate ourselves comes with regulating our outer world and having a routine, having structure. I often start with that with my clients. If it's obvious they don't have that, if they're going to bed at 3 in the morning one night and then staying in bed all day, and we work on that first. Let's work on going to bed at night when it's dark and waking up in the morning when it's light, and getting yourself back in that pattern to follow what we're kind of meant to do. So I'll just read this quote about IPSRT, interpersonal and social rhythm therapy, because it explains it a little more. The therapist works with the client to better understand the importance of circadian rhythms and routines in our life, including eating, sleeping, and other daily activities. Clients are taught to extensively track their moods every day. Once routines are identified, IPSRT therapy seeks to help the individual keep the routines consistent and address those problems that arise that might upset the routines. This often involves a focus on building better and healthier interpersonal relationships and skills. So often I work with people on creating a daily schedule. So let's say they're in a very severe depression, they're not working, they're not going to school, they're not really doing anything, they're at home all day, staring at the wall or watching TV. We create a schedule. You're going to get up at this time, 7 a.m. You're going to make breakfast. You're going to eat your breakfast. You're going to shower. Write everything down. And then they can slowly start adding in more activities. You know, I'm going to take a 10-minute walk. I'm going to walk to the library and read a book. I'm going to call a friend. Anything, you start where you are and you build from there. And it can be baby steps. It doesn't have to be huge changes. In fact, it's better if it's baby steps. And then creating a weekly schedule and a monthly schedule. And that I've seen work wonders with people, you know, being able to slowly come out of that depression, or with mania too. For me, my manias were so severe and they created so much inner chaos, I guess you could say, that I needed outer structure when I didn't have the internal structure. And I think that's something important for me. And when I would go to the hospital, it was very structured. You know, you have to wake up at this time, you have breakfast at this time, you go to this group at this time. So that did help me come back into a state of mind where I could function in this world. Because I was in another world, for sure. And so when they talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, it's about changing our thinking, which changes our behaviors. And so first we have to become aware of our thoughts. And often everyone we tell ourselves negative self-talk a lot. Like things that we would never say to a friend or someone we know, but we tell it to ourselves. And especially in depression, that's very common to have just constant negative self-talk. And things like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. How could I say that? So many things we tell ourselves and we're not even aware we're doing it. So CBT can help us become aware first. That's the first step is, oh my gosh, I just thought that thought. It's not really helpful to me. It's not helpful to my goal. I can change that thought. And it takes time because the automatic thoughts are a habit. So becoming aware of them and stopping them and changing them also has to be a habit. But then once you develop that habit, it becomes automatic. And the positive self-talk is, your default. So that can really help with improving mental health. Support system. So this is where, if you're a caregiver or a family member, have a loved one dealing with bipolar disorder, you're a very important part of their recovery because we need support. And I found this quote from the book Social. It says, when we experience social pain, the feeling is as real as physical pain. Our need to connect is as fundamental as our need for food and water. So as human beings, we evolved and we survived by being in tribes and by helping each other, right, and protecting each other. And, so we have that inner need, and it's innate in us. And I know when I was very depressed, I didn't want to be around people, I didn't want to be social, I would withdraw, be by myself, and that's very normal for depression, that's what happens. But still, I made myself, my friends would call, I didn't want to talk to them, but I would anyway, a little bit. Or I'd go out to the store, my mom would take me, and it was overwhelming, all the sounds and the sights, because I could not even process, those things in the environment. But I made myself take baby steps, and then I gradually adjusted and got back to more of myself. So we all need support, and when it can be mutual, that's the best, because we don't want to be constantly leaning on other people and never being able to get back to them. So another motivation to get well is that you can be a mutual supporter. you put on there for supporters, ask whether your actions are perceived as supportive, otherwise they can be counterproductive. So I hear from clients sometimes that, yeah, my parents are doing this, doing that, and they think they're trying to help me, but it really, I don't like it, and it's working against, it's not working for me. So it's good to communicate and say, is this what you need? How can I help you? How can I be there for you right now? And they may say, I just want to be alone, and that's okay. Let's see what else. So one thing that I've learned as I've become a speaker over the last many years, I think maybe, I don't remember, 15 years ago is when I first stood up and spoke publicly about having bipolar disorder, and I shared some of the poetry I had written that related to, what I was going through. And the reaction that I got was so incredible that it made me realize how important it is to openly share about these things, especially mental health. Like, I talk about Crohn's disease, and I like to spread a message of hope with that for sure. But I speak much more about bipolar disorder and mental health issues because there's still stigma there, and people are still hesitant to talk about it and say, yes, I was diagnosed with this, yes, I have this, yes, I struggle with this. When I was diagnosed 26 years ago, it was much more silent, and there was, I think, a lot more shame around it, and just not talk about. People hid it, and, my family didn't know how to tell other people about what I was experiencing. I didn't even know what I was experiencing. So I think there's still stigma. It's come a long way with people, well-known people like celebrities and famous people stepping forward and talking about their own lived experience. I think that really helps open up, for people to feel more safe talking about it. But I've just experienced how healing that is to be open, and how healing it has been for me, and healing for the audience or whoever's there, because it creates a safe space, and then people feel like they too can talk about whatever has been going on with them. So I really believe in telling the truth, and how people say, how are you doing? I'm fine. And it ends there. If I'm checking out at a grocery store and the cashier says, how are you doing? I'll actually tell them how I'm doing, and I'll have a conversation, and it's a real connection, it's a human connection, and I think the more we experience that, those genuine connections with people, then the more healing can happen for the other person too. Anything else about support system? Sometimes my clients say, but I don't have any supportive people in my life, my family is not supportive, or I don't really have any family. What am I supposed to do for support? And you can build a family. You can build a strong support system by starting with, whatever you have available to you, whether it's going to a support group or volunteering, or there's a lot of places now online with meetup groups and, even social media where you're connecting online and not even meeting in person. All of those things can help foster that support. And again, where there's a will, there's a way. So I think often our support groups are, we can create our own family from the people that we are like-minded with and that we can be, create mutual support with. Okay. Number 10, last but not least, wellness plan. Because we're always changing, so our plan needs to always change, right? And so a lot of the things that I talked about can be wellness tools in your plan. And so like Debbie mentioned, I'm a trained facilitator for RAP, which is through the Copeland Center, and I put the website because I think it's an invaluable source of information, and you can order the RAP books right from the website. And that's what I use as wellness plans with my clients because I'm trained to lead those classes. But there's a lot of other types of plans. I brought some other examples of different, structures that you can put your plan into. And afterwards, if you're interested, I can show you, what those look like and how you develop your own plan or how you support someone too. But really, it has to be created by that person for them. You can't do a RAP plan or a wellness plan for someone else. They have to create it for themselves, and that's where the power comes from it and the empowerment. And so a crisis plan is something you create when you're well, and you share it with your supporters ahead of time. So if you ever are in a crisis where other people need to take charge of your care, they know ahead of time what your wishes are, kind of like an advance directive. And you specify everything that would be part of that, so they know, and it really helps the people supporting you to feel like, okay, I'm doing what they want, what they really want. So, let's see. Before I end, this is a really important topic that I don't want to miss or not speak of: suicide prevention. Bipolar disorder, at least what we learned from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, is that it's the most lethal of mental health diagnoses because of suicide. And part of that is because people who experience the highs and then the lows, they may feel the need to escape their suffering and feel completely hopeless, and then start, especially in mixed states, when you're having that angst and that irritability and depression, but you start having the energy of mania, then you can go out and actually do something. When someone is severely depressed, often they don't have that energy or the ability to even go out and try to harm themselves. But with bipolar disorder, when that energy starts kicking in, then people can actually take action on how much suffering they're experiencing. Right? So there's a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-TALK, 8255, which is 24/7 and free. So I recommend that people reach out to them if they're having those thoughts, if they think a loved one is, and to open up a conversation. Because I know some people tell me they are nervous about if they think a friend or a family member is thinking about suicide. They think, well, if I bring it up and I ask them directly, what if that makes them go do it? Or, what if it's uncomfortable for me, I won't know the right thing to say. So just talk about it anyway. Ask them, because it shows you care. And it's okay to say, look, I've noticed that, you're really down lately. Are you having any thoughts about not wanting to be here? And to normalize that, because we all have those thoughts sometimes. I was having those thoughts a lot in my deepest depressions, and I came close to actually acting on them one time. So it's something we can't just ignore. I think if you have any sense of that, reach out for help. And so I didn't put this on the slide, but I have it with me. There's a book called Suicide: The Forever Decision by Paul Quinnett, and it's free to download as a PDF, or you can order the hardcover book on Amazon or on that website. The website is qprinstitute.com, and they offer suicide prevention training. So if you go on that website, again, it's qprinstitute.com, and you click on store, you can find the free PDF of the book. And they are training, the QPR stands for question, persuade, refer. So the first part, question, is talking about it. Are you having thoughts like that? I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to be with you and make sure until you get referred to someone professional who can help you work through that. And then, okay, so I skipped the P, but that's persuade. So persuading them to, stay safe until they can get help. And it's really valuable training. So I would say, even if you feel completely hopeless, there is always hope. And going back to number one, things are always changing, life is change. So know that things are going to change, and they're going to change for the better. And if you're ready to do whatever it takes to become well, then they will change for the better. I can pretty much guarantee that. So I brought this poem because sometimes it's inspired me when I've been really down. And you may have heard it because it's in the public domain and it's often quoted. But it's called Don't Quit. So I just want to read it. When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile, but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Life is queer with its twists and turns, as every one of us sometimes learns. And many a fellow turns about, when he might have won had he stuck it out. Don't give up though the pace seems slow, you may succeed with another blow. Often the goal is nearer than it seems to a faint and faltering man. Often the struggler has given up when he might have captured the victor's cup. And he learned too late when the night came down how close he was to the golden crown. Success is failure turned inside out, the silver tint in the clouds of doubt. And you never can tell how close you are. It might be near when it seems afar. So stick to the fight when your heart is hit. It's when things seem worst that you must not quit. So I know for me, it felt like I kept getting knocked down over and over again, and I didn't know how far away the answers were, where I didn't have to keep suffering and picking myself up and starting over, not just to be knocked down again. But I did get there, and my message is that everyone can get there. That recovery is possible for everyone. It may mean different things for each person, but things can always get better, and they will get better if you have that knowingness, that belief. You know, we're very powerful beings, and we can always start from where we are and take baby steps forward. And part of the recovery journey is 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and that's okay. And it's being patient with yourself or with your loved ones, and allowing us to learn that way, but also to not give up. Keep going, don't quit. Talking about wrap it all up. So those are the 10 topics. Like I said, they're jumping off points to do your own research. That's part of the personal responsibility. I think we're empowered when we research things ourselves. I'm not just gonna give everything to you because, for one, I don't have all the answers and I don't know each person and individually what they need. And 2, when I've done my own research and I was careful with, you know, my sources, make sure now that we have online everything, you know, be careful of the sources because you need to make sure they're reputable and there's research behind it, and you're not just trusting things that, you know, are going to end up being harmful. So find out what works best for you, and I would say it's best to not try to change too many things at once. So to start with 1 or 2 areas that you feel drawn to, and then move on from there. So once you have one thing kind of, you know, strong, then you can work on the next thing. And like I said, these 10 things are arbitrary. There's so many things and they fit into different categories, but I just wanted to outline it in a way that was, you know, easier to understand and follow. So, what are the questions? I don't know how much time, Debbie, there's, but we're okay. Okay, yes.
One of the difficult things over the years, there's such a high rate of chemical dependency and alcohol abuse among bipolar patients. In trying to figure out almost which to, you can treat both of them sort of at the same time, but do you have a preference on how you do that? Or do you feel like you have to treat the chemical dependency part first in order to kind of get a bit of a clearer mind in order to work more with bipolar, or vice versa?
Yeah, that's a good question because a lot of the clients I work with do have the co-occurring, both the mental health and the substance use disorders. And of course, when we're going through those things, we want to self-medicate, you know, to deal with the pain, and it's very common. So I think the thought used to be that you deal with the substance first so that you can get a clearer picture of the mental health, but what the research is showing, at least the latest research, is that you work with both at the same time, and ideally the integrated treatment is at the same place with the same treatment team. So that's still kind of shifting, but that's what I see in my clients too, that we're not going to wait on the mental health treatment because they actually need both at the same time, even though it can muddy the picture of what's really going on and what is substance symptoms and what is not. You know, that's at least what we're moving toward.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
I went through a dual diagnosis program twice over. I've been in detox 3 times. I recently got diagnosed with bipolar. that my mental health came first, the substance abuse subsided. So it was, as you're saying, working concurrently,
Right.
but there's a cart before the horse. And I think dealing with your head and heart first is most important. And then it's like the substance wafts away.
Right, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think that's very true. And a lot of the people I work with, their need for substances gets much less when they get, a handle on their mental health. And that's often why they started using the substances. So, yes.
My daughter is very medication compliant, like never have had an issue with that, but sleep and diet, whole other story. And it's she's 17, and I can so clearly see what the issues are and what she needs to do. Like some of the tips you have are so great, but she's very resistant. So what do you do with some of your clients that are resistant to, opening? Because there's more than just the medication.
Right.
There's more to staying healthy.
Right. And I found that for myself, that, and that's what I tell my clients too, that,
Can you repeat the question?
Oh,
so
sure.
we can get that on tape?
yeah, so the question was, you have a 17-year-old daughter who, she's been very compliant with her medication treatment, but you can see the sleep, and diet is not there yet, those pieces aren't there, and she's reluctant to work on those things, it sounds like. So, I think what I tell my clients is that medication can be one piece of the puzzle, and then there can be hundreds of pieces, right? So the more pieces you put in the puzzle of your whole health, mind, body, spirit health, that wellness picture, the stronger you can make that for yourself. So what I use with clients who are in that place of, oftentimes they're not taking their medication consistently, or they are, but they're not doing other things, or they're doing things that are working against their health. I use something called motivational interviewing. So that's about finding what that person's goals are, what their motivation is, what their values are, and letting them be the ones to realize there's a discrepancy between what they're doing and what they value, or what they're working towards. And so it's not coming from me. I'm just reflecting back to them what they're telling me, and then they're realizing, oh, I think I want to start doing this because then I'll move in the direction I actually want to go in. So it does have to come from within, and she's so young that she may need to learn lessons the hard way a little bit before she decides she's ready to work on other areas. But I think that's a strong emphasis in our mental health care system too, that as long as the person's taking the medication as prescribed, that's the most important thing. But what I found for myself is the other things have been just as important. And as I've been able to put them in place and develop that strong foundation of health, they became less and less needed for me. So I went from 4 or 5 or 6 medications at the same time to now half of one. And hopefully at some point I'll be able to be well without any.
Just add one thing, after working with adolescents for years and years, if you ask me what percentage of 17-year-olds have good diets and sleep patterns, I would say about 1%. So I think, and I'm not trying to minimize it, but I think that's a whole other part of the issue. It's like when a guy 20 wins the lottery and throws money at you, and go, what a jerk. You take the average 20-year-old and hand them a whole lot of money, they're probably not going to do a lot of investing. So I think we have to look at those age
For sure.
issues also.
Yeah, for sure. And I completely understand how hard it is for a mom or a loved one to watch someone suffer when things could help them. I mean, same with a provider as a therapist or a counselor. I know that this person needs to do that, right? But I can't tell them you have to do this. I have to let them learn and make their own mistakes. And so if it's a loved one, it's even harder to watch them suffer. If they would just do this, I know they would. But sometimes we have to, it's their path. let them walk it.
Are there certain tips to give our audience about how to go about helping someone understand, or start taking that path?
Tips to help someone start taking the recovery path.
Well, for example, with sleep, diet, exercise, that kind of thing. You talked about the way in which you handle that. Can you give us an example, or
Well, I think
help them understand?
like what I mentioned about starting with one thing or two things, start with what you feel drawn to first. And then really focus on that area. Don't focus on 10 things at the same time. That'll just be overwhelming, and it'll probably cause, frustration and won't work out that well. So I think, for younger people, having peer support, people their age, can be really helpful. People who are going through similar things or who are doing well, learning from their peers can be really useful, and having the support of others who maybe walked a little bit farther on the path to help guide. But again, everyone's path is unique, so I don't tell my clients or people I work with, you have to do things the way I did them, because they're a completely different person with different experiences and different needs, and they need to find what works for them. But I can also guide them and support them. And there are certain things that are universal, like sleep. I just find so many people with mood disorders have sleep issues, and when you can work on improving the sleep, the other things fall into place. And because these areas are so overlapping and interrelated and interconnected, when you work on one area, the other areas improve too. And so that's why I think going with what you feel drawn to first will really lead to everything else that you need eventually. And there's also patience, knowing that these changes don't happen overnight, and we're all on a journey, and it's the journey, not the destination. Being gentle with ourselves. Did that answer? Yes.
Yes. Speaking of which, I was a zookeeper for 20 years, and that advice was always something that we told each other as well. Which, if you're raising a baby chick, as we did thousands of times over, you can't change too many parameters at once. If they're having problems, you can't change the heat, the food, and the water at the same time. You just change one, and the rest resets itself. And to segue to a question, I've done a lot of work with my IOPs and different therapies. My last one, I think, falls on sleep, and so I have a specific question about sleep for you.
Okay.
Since you talked about sleep disorders, I have the middle awakening.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to bed, and then I wake up in the middle of the night. And I've heard anthropologically and historically speaking, this is documented. That's what we evolutionarily used to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get up and we relate to our partners, or we have our thoughts, and then we go back to bed. Sometimes it exhausts me, sometimes it refreshes me. Do you think that is a sleep disorder, or something that's relative to bipolarity? Because this is actually fairly new to me.
Yeah, that's something I've dealt with a lot, and I still do. I mean, I still struggle with sleep issues, so that's probably the one area that I'm still focused on improving the most, I would say. And it's very common for people. Sometimes they have no problem falling asleep. Sometimes they still have a problem falling asleep, but then they wake up too early, before, after 4 hours or 5 hours or 3 hours. So for one, it's very common. For two, as far as how we evolved, I think that could have been part of it. I've learned that we sleep in cycles of 90 minutes. So you may find that you're waking up after one of those cycles. So for me, I can feel myself now, because I'm very tuned into it, when I'm starting the next cycle. So sometimes I'll wake up like at 4:30 in the morning. My sleep doctor said, if you're laying there and you're not falling back asleep, and you're starting to get anxious that you have a long day tomorrow and you're not gonna, all those thoughts of, oh my God, I'm not gonna handle everything, I'm gonna be so tired. just get up, go into a darkened room and do something else outside of the bedroom, like, or wash some dishes, or in darker light.
That's what I tend to do, and it's kind of funny because it ties into all the other aspects that you say about mental health. Like, I'm up at sunrise every morning, but I go and take my walk, and I go and sit and think my thoughts and do my mental health thing. But at the same time, it seems like sleep is that last puzzle piece that just doesn't quite fit.
Yeah, and I think it's finding what fits into our life at the time and experimenting, like trying, okay, I'm going to get up and do some things and then see if I feel tired and can fall back to sleep. Or if that doesn't work, I'm just going to meditate while I'm in bed and let my body relax and rest. That actually works better for me, I think, because if I do get up, I tend to be a lot more tired during the day than if I just stay in bed and relax myself. Yeah, so it's just, everyone's different, and it's experimenting and finding what works for you. And keep learning different good sleep hygiene tips. Like I said, online there's a lot more than what I talked about, and then trying them.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I think I'm done with questions. So thank you. I want to say if you have a question which did not get answered, you can email me, serenastoryofhope@gmail.com. And I want to thank International Bipolar Foundation for doing this talk and giving me the opportunity to share these topics and this information. And I highly recommend, if you're able to donate to them. I often refer my clients to the Healthy Living with Bipolar book that they provide free, which is an awesome resource. And you can download it on the website for free, or they'll actually mail it to you, a hard copy in the mail for free, if you request it on the website. So things like that, these talks, the webinars, everything they provide, donations really help to continue them to do that work and to get out this information that can help so many people around the world. And so I need to definitely acknowledge them. Thank you, everyone.